Hi there, welcome back. Today I'm going to make another apron. You saw this apron in one of our other videos. This is a craft apron, and today I'm going to show you how to make this apron. It's a little bit fancier, some pockets on it, and it's got a little bit of a dropped waist. Kind of cute. So I went to the fabric store on the weekend, and as usual I bought way too much fabric. Today I decided I'm going to make this apron with this real pretty sunflower fabric. I've made my own pattern for this. And it will be available on thefriendlyfox.co under the Downloads tab. So let's get creative. When you buy your fabric from the fabric store, they use scissors to cut it, and it's usually off grain, and it's really important to start your project on grain. And so you just come to the edge of your fabric here, take a small cut, and that's going to give you a nice straight place to start from. The piece that was on here is really thin on this end, and then it gets really wide, and then it goes somewhat thinner again. So that's not a good place to start your fabric from. So get your fabric nice and square to start so that you know what you're doing. And then this piece right here, we're going to cut on the fold. I've put my cuts in at 18 inches. That's going to be the front of my skirt. This back piece, also 18 inches. But on this piece, this is the two back pieces that go back here. They're not as wide as the front piece. So, using my tape measure, I know that I'm going to be 14 inches. Always rip when you can, as opposed to cutting, because you'll never cut it on the straight grain, but ripping always gives you the straight grain. Don't need those pieces. Now, because this is the back left and back right, I'm also going to cut it right here. So that's my one side and the other side. And this is going to be the large piece that wraps around the front. Okay, now I've got the bottom piece cut. Now we're going to cut this part. Now before I start, you could get really fancy and do a contrast color here. You can do your pockets in a contrast. If you wanted to do plain red or a white pocket, you could do something like that. You could do your straps in a contrast color. I'm going to do mine all in the sunflower pattern. So I've already created my pattern pieces. And so now this is the bib front. This is this piece here. So this piece is going to go on the fold here. And I'm starting with a nice straight line across the top because I ripped it. These are my two pockets. I'll place those over here. And this is the strap. Now this strap is going to be cut for here, and for here, and for the back on both sides. Clearly that's not enough strap, but placed on the fold and cut 4 times, you'll get 4 nice long straps. Because this fabric has some sticky to it, I'm not going to pin it. You can see that's going to be the one strap, one for there, another one for there, one for this side, and one for that side. So now let's go sew. So I brought all 4 straps here, and I'm going to start by turning the straps inside out. So I'm going to do about a 3/8 seam allowance. Straight stitch. I could do this on the serger, but right now my serger has black thread on it and I want to sew in white. Leaving your needle in when you turn the fabric, always make sure that you start in the right place as opposed to leaving the needle up and trying to turn your fabric. So my Pfaff decided to take a little holiday, and it has to go to the repair shop or the spa and have some work done to it. So I've switched to my backup machine. Now when I get to this end of it, I don't close it off because clearly I have to turn it inside out, and so I have to have a place to turn it. So as I have finished this one, when we get to the other end, I have left that open so that I can turn these straps inside out. Okay, now I'm going to go and turn these inside out. Remember when you're turning inside out to clip that corner so that it doesn't have too much bulk inside. I'm going to turn these inside out and press them. And then I use a pin to get the corner really sharp. And then I'm going to press everything. So on this top that we're about to take to the machine, we're going to turn these sides first. I'm going to do a double turn on it so I don't have any raw edges and loose threads. I do about 2 1/4-inch turns on it. And just to save myself coming back over here, I'm going to do 2 1/4-inch turns on here too. When I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to flip this up to do this stitch before I do this top turn, but I'm just going to turn it under now anyway. So I've made sure I've got my corners nice and tight. And then as I'm coming down the edge here, I like my edge to not roll over on itself, so I sort of roll it into position as I'm pressing. Now on the end here, because it has to fit under here, I'm going to just go ahead and press that now. So I'm just going to give this a bit of a turn. I'm going to do all 4 like that. So now when you're pressing these under, these 4 turns, the seam that's there, this side is the fold, this side has the seam in it. I always put the seam away from, like instead of the seam facing into your shoulder, the seam should face out. So this one, because the seam is on this side, is going to go on this corner. And this one, the seam is on this side. So this one is going to go on this corner. So now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to open this and I'm going to stitch this so that that's turned down. And then I'm going to stitch these 2 into place here with that seam on the outside. So now I've stitched down both sides of the bib, and now I'm going to turn this under and attach those straps for the neck. This is a weak spot on the apron because you're going to be tugging on it. So I like to start over here and go across the top and then do the stitching for the top of the bib. To make sure that I'm catching the stitching on this side, I sort of use this space here as a guide and try to not alter it. And then just to make things easier for myself, I'm going to reverse. And now I'm going to come all the way across this seam to the other strap. And now I'm going to fasten this second strap with this stitch side facing out towards the shoulder. And just get it tucked in there with all that other fabric. And I like it to be right up on the side so that this is all together. Again, I'm using this space right here as a bit of a guide to know that when I get down here, I am on top of this seam. Now I'm going to go back to the ironing board and make sure that this is all nicely pressed, and we're going to start on the skirt now. Now we're going to work on the skirt. These are the two pockets. So in order to sew them onto the fabric, I want to turn the sides under so that it looks nice when I actually apply it to the skirt front. So I'm going to turn the top down twice with about 1/4 inch. So that's what the top will look like, so that when you put your hand, and I'm going to stitch it along here, but when you put your hand into the pocket, it'll be finished nicely. The side and the bottom, you don't have to turn under twice because you're going to stitch right along that edge. And that edge is going to be the top of the pocket. So I'm going to stitch on these 3 sides. These are just a square, so it doesn't matter top to bottom, side to side. They're just squares. And for me, just to make sure my pockets are the same size, I pull this one down beside it and just make sure that I'm the same size. Now we're not going to apply those to the skirt yet. First of all, we're going to go around the waistband and gather the top of the skirt so that it matches the bib. So this big piece here is the skirt front. There's the center fold. So that's going to be in line with your tummy. The skirt backs are going to attach to these 2 sides here. You can't get this wrong because this side is much shorter. So clearly then, this length is the one that's going to match. So before I can gather the skirt all the way around, I have to attach the sides. And that's what I'm going to do now. Now you're going to notice that my bottom piece here is hanging out further than the top piece. I could take this to my serger and do it all in one piece, but I don't think it leaves a nice looking finish on the inside of the skirt. So I'm going to show you how I French the seams. Now I take that and I fold it over, and I'm going to run it through again with a zigzag. And that's called a French seam. It just looks a lot cleaner. You'll never see it from this side of the fabric, but it just looks nicer on this side of the fabric. Now I'm going to do the other side. So now I'm going to gather this. And I've done gathering in a lot of different ways, and I know there are different techniques that everybody uses, but this is I don't even want to tell you how long I've been sewing. This is the easiest one for me. I start about 1.5 inches, 2 inches in, pretty close to the edge. I open my stitch to the longest stitch that I can get, and I go right all the way across the top, all the way across the center, and across the back ends for the other side, and I'm going to take it all the way to the end here, again about 1.5 inches, 2 inches from the back seam. Now I'm going to reverse here because I don't want to lose my gathers. And so now I'm going to come all the way to the front here where I started, and I'm going to pull this top thread, and I'm going to pull and pull, and as I'm going across it, I'm going to stretch that gather onto the rest of the apron. Don't get too quick with this, because if this top thread breaks, you're starting all over again. This is a time-consuming process, but you just got to be slow and gentle and just keep gathering it, pulling it, more fabric on. And this thread is going to get longer and longer. And you just keep working the gathers over to the other side. Don't let it bunch up too much like this, because that's when you're going to get the thread to break. Just keep working it along. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways to do gathering, but in years of doing this, for me, is the easiest way of doing it. Here's my bib top to the apron, and I want to make sure that my skirt fits inside this space, so that when I go to stitch it on there, the gathers all look nice and even, so that there's not a big blank spot or there's too many gathers in one spot. So I'm going to make sure that, first of all, it fits inside this space. Clearly I'm too long, so I've got to gather up about another 8 inches. When I made my first apron of this pattern, it seemed to take forever. But now I've done multiple of this style. And once you get a feel for it, it just comes really easy and quick. Okay, now I'm pretty close to what I want to be, so I'm going to tie this now so that it can't slip out or gather anymore. This is the space I'm working with. And now I'm just going to work on making the gathers even. Going to just stitch the top part of the pocket, because the pocket is going to get applied to the skirt front now. Here's the side seam between the skirt front and the skirt back. And I'm going to position the pocket on here before I stitch the skirt top, or the bib and the skirt together. About 1 inch or 2 from this side seam here, and then I'm going to go about 4 inches from the bottom. This is one of the few times you'll see me use pins. And the same on this side seam here. I'm going to pin the other pocket 4 inches up and 1 inch or 2 from the side. Okay, now I'm going to go and stitch these 3 seams and the other pocket onto the skirt, and then we're going to go ahead and join the skirt top to the actual bib. So now the skirt pocket, and I'm just going to stitch this on the 3 sides. These corners are always a little iffy, so I always put some extra stitching in there from hands jamming in them. They can separate easily, so I want to just give it a little extra reinforcement. If you're going to stitch over a pin, the needle will jump over something like that. The needle will not jump over if the pin is sitting that way. Always make sure when you're stitching these too that you don't have extra layers stuck under there, or you'll stitch other parts of the apron together that you don't want stitched together. I just tuck all these threads inside. And again, back and forth, just to give it that extra reinforcement. And now I'm going to do the other pocket also. Okay, now the pockets are on, and now I'm going to attach the bib to the actual skirt. So right sides together, so that when it's finished stitching, it's going to look like that. I've already worked my gathers to be nicely spread out evenly throughout the skirt, so I'm not going to worry about that. But now we're just going to go ahead and stitch this. Remembering that I like to French the seam, I'm going to leave a little bit extra on the bottom so that I can use that to flip it over my stitching and hide all that stitching under there. When I'm watching it go under, I can make sure the gathers are all staying nicely spread. See, that just looks so much cleaner than a raw edge in there. And now the bib is attached to the skirt. We're going to go back and turn these sides under on the ironing board. So now there's the bib, and this is the side. This is where the second strap is going to get, the side strap is going to get sewn in. So I'm going to do a turn under on the side here, and a second turn. So now that pressing's done. And then remember what I said about the side seam not facing up? So this is going to get fastened right here on the edge. I'll bump it all the way up. You can pin it if you want to or not. And then I'm going to go around and all the way down the side on both sides. I'll do the other side. I'm going to go to the ironing board and do the last thing is the hem. Turning it under a second time so that when I make this stitch along here, it's a nice closed in. If I tried to stitch this, it would get ravelly and raw. So by turning it under twice, I'm getting a nice clean edge. Now I'm just going to go stitch that hem and we're finished. You can see that raw bit right there. I don't like that. So make sure that you just tuck that in so that when you do your stitching, it holds that raw bit in and you won't see it. So that's it. After you finish the hem, spend a little time tying knots and trimming threads, and then you're finished. This isn't a project that I would recommend for an absolute beginner. But if you are a beginner and you want to try something a little more challenging, it's not very difficult. And if you follow the tutorial and the pattern that you can download from thefriendlyfox.co, you should be able to make it without any problem. Thanks for joining me.